So this is one of those weird moments in life, and I'll just give you a little reference, and then we're just going to talk therapy our way through this one, because my mom's parents were immigrants from Lithuania. They went to Toronto. Eventually they saved up, they bought a house. They raised my mom and my uncle in that house. My grandfather passed away before I was born. My uncle stayed in the house to take care of my grandmother. She needed somebody to take care of, that was her thing. Plus, he was also a lifelong bachelor, so this worked out well for him. He has only ever lived in that house. 2 years ago, he passed away. We would go up to visit, but the year before COVID, he came down, so it had been 5 years since we had been up in Toronto. The year before, his oldest neighbor had passed away and sold his house, and then for 2 years the house was under construction, so I never met his new neighbors to the left. But in COVID, my uncle had become friendly with them over the garden wall. They gardened, he gardened. He had strong feelings about some of their flower choices, but apparently whatever. They were actually the ones who noticed that he had passed away. He was very window blinds open at 7 a.m. kind of thing, and when he didn't open his blinds all day, at the end of the day, they called the cops and were like, hey, can you do a wellness check? They went in to find out that he had passed away. Our numbers were taped up in the front hallway. They are the ones who called us to be like, hey, we have some news. The house 2 years later is still in probate, partially complicated by the fact that while we are Canadians, we live in America. And so pretty much the last 2 years, all my vacation time is us going up to Toronto because my mom has to sign some piece of paperwork or another to continue to probate this house. Plus, she has been going through physical therapy. She had her knee replaced. He actually passed away on the Tuesday, and we couldn't get up until the next Wednesday because she had to get cleared by her surgeon. She had just had her knee replaced when we went up. When we went up, there were 57 handwritten letters that had been put through the letterbox. We hadn't put his obituary into the paper. People in Toronto are so desperate for real estate that they just track who dies in Toronto, and then they hunt them down through public records and find where they live. And the offers for the house were sight unseen. Mainly cash. I will buy it today. We will cut you a check today. That was a very weird afternoon spent on the couch, going through his mail and trying to figure out those letters. We knew Toronto real estate was expensive. All city real estate is expensive. We did not realize 57 letters later, how desperate people were. And this is a working class neighborhood. This is not ooh, we live in the Vanderbilt mansion. Mm-mm. Imagine what two immigrants could have afforded in the 1930s in Toronto. So anyhow, I have talked to the neighbors to the left. I know the neighbors to the right, and I know some of the other neighbors, but mostly the older neighbors have moved out over time. It's a lot of very young families in the neighborhood. I have talked to the neighbors next door because, they are two professionals with 3 kids. We haven't bonded or anything, but, they were nice. They cared enough to, pay attention to my uncle. He was older. But most of our communications over the past few years have been house still in probate? Yeah. Because people will knock on their door sometimes to be like, hey, we heard this house was for sale, but we've never seen a for sale sign. What's going on? Or some people will be like, I put a letter in their mailbox, and then I put another letter in their mailbox, and I've never heard back from them. Toronto real estate is apparently very... So the wife will text me, and she usually texts me at 5 a.m., and I usually text her sometime in the afternoon, evening, so there's always an 8-hour delay between our text messages, but it's always hey, there's some beautiful flowers in your garden, do you mind if we pick them? No, absolutely, please. Last year, the horseradish really came in, and she was like, hey, do you mind if we cut it up and distribute it to people in the neighborhood? Good horseradish shouldn't go to waste. Yeah, go for it. It's in-depth conversations of 40 words or less. The last time we were up there, they didn't even know we were up there. She was away on a business trip. He had all the kids. It was 3 degrees. So we were running from the house to the car and the car to the house. And I had left this little hand truck outside, and I had texted her and I was like, hey, we completely forgot to put it in the garage. Zero rush. But when you have a moment, can one of you put it in the garage so it doesn't rust in the snow? And she's like, you were up here? I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, we had no idea. They have 3 young kids. Makes sense. That's our relationship. So I'm on book club, and she calls. My phone's on silent, but I see her screen pop up, and I'm like, oh shit. The only reason she would be calling is if the house is in fire or water is coming out of the basement windows. The house is in probate. Please don't make me go through insurance with my mom on this. No, I cannot. I was like, hi. She's like, hi. Do you have a minute? It's is the house okay? Are you okay? Is everybody okay? Is the neighborhood okay? Everything's good? Yeah. A beautiful day here. Everybody was just kind of playing in the front lawn. A couple people stopped by. We were talking about you. We were talking about me. So I go from house on fire anxiety to why are you talking about me, anxiety? Because I mean, I've seen people in the neighborhood, but I've seen them as in like in my pajamas taking the trash out to the curb or like walking to the car like, hi, are you guys like taking care of the house? Like, yep, like that's under 20 word conversations with the neighbors who happened to be on the street at the time. They are all well aware of the situation because people have knocked on their doors as well to be like, so that house, you know. So anyhow, like, who's we? Now I'm having panics that they've like discovered my YouTube and like the neighborhood hates me, so I'm like, yeah, of course I have time, what's up? My voice is now up here. She's like, well, I don't know if you know, but my sister-in-law lives in New Jersey. I was like, yeah. She's like, well, you know, they've decided they're gonna come up and stay with us for a while, like, you know, with what's going on in the US, like, they thought it might be better to come stay with us for a while. And I was like, She's like, well, we were talking about you guys and we were wondering if you and your mom had any plans to move up here. Now, like, in the back of my head, I was like, maybe I'll just keep the house, we'll turn it into a rental, and then someday I'll retire up there with like my girlfriends and we'll just turn it into like a Golden Girl situation with like decently priced medicine. But like, that is such a long-term thought, it isn't really even a thing. But recently, like, yeah, she's like, well, you know, one of the people here, guy I've never met, is an attorney, and he was like, well, we don't know if you know this, but in probate you can live in the house. Like, you know, if it's a split of the property multiple ways, like, you would need to get permission, but like, you can reside in the house long term even if it's in probate. And I was like, well, you know, mom's sole inheritor, so like, yeah, we know that the house needs work, so like, it wasn't our plan. You also can't fix up the house when it's in probate. So, like, the house has to come out of probate before we can make structural changes to the house, which also includes, like, repair of plaster. So it's like, yeah, we are aware of that, and actually we have been, like, thinking of coming up, like, you know, we don't want to, and it feels like running, but at the same time, they're like, well, you know, we were talking, we know you're in some kind of marketing in New York, that's what, you know, one of them said, and it was like, can we try to help you find a job? Like, we don't know if your employer would let you, like, is that what's holding you back? Maybe one of us can, like, work a connection for you and get you some kind of employment up here. And I was like, yeah, that would be really nice. And at this point, I've, like, walked into the living room and I have it on speaker because I'm like, Mom should probably hear this weirdness. It's like, well, you know, we've seen you walking your mother up and down the sidewalk. You know, she's had her hip replaced, so, you know, the more walking she does, the better. And there's a new sidewalk out front, which is like the perfect environment for physical therapy flat walk. You know, like, one of us is usually around like some point in the day. Like, you know, if you had to get a job and you had to go work downtown, like, one of us could come like walk your mom a little bit. And my mom is like, but also like, oh, like, can we come walk your mom for you? Didn't go over well with her, but like, the idea being like, you know, if you need an extra set of hands, you know, like, and I was like, that would be really nice if you people who I've never met on speakerphone. Like, you know, we were just at the park the other day and we were talking about your house and we were talking about my sister-in-law, and the conversation came up like, what are you guys gonna do? Are you guys gonna come up? And, you know, today it was a nice day, the kids were playing, and we were just really starting to think about like, you know, is there anything we could do to help you guys like move up here and make it as easy as possible for you? These are people I have never met, minus like in my pajamas hauling trash to the curb, waving, who are willing to try to find me at least a temporary stopgap job so I can pay bills and like take care of my mom, or at least watch her as she, like, you know, takes laps. I've never met them. Most of them probably don't like me because they keep on getting people knocking on their doors asking why I haven't sold my house yet. Like, I've honestly considered putting like a "the house is in probate, leave us alone" sign on the front door. Super nice that people in the neighborhood keep an eye on the house to make sure it's not getting broken into. Much appreciated. But like, I've literally never met them, but they're like, hey, how can we help you? Canada is just different. Like, I hung up with them eventually, and Mom and I just sat in the living room looking at each other for like 10 minutes being like, Canada's